The Kai Monastery is in flames, and now we're faced with a choice. Left or right? Which section of the woods are we going to journey through? And in this, I want to explore some wargaming tactica. We're looking at some meta here and some different ways to not only build out your Kai, build out Lone Wolf, but also understanding the mechanics of the game. Because there are a lot of different ways to play through. You can play through each individual book. You can go through 1 through 5. You can do a no-load run, which means if you die, this is how I play. If I die along the way, what this means is I don't restart the book that I died in. I go all the way back to the beginning. We start over with 0 equipment. And within that tactic, I've been pushing up to the Lone Wolf playlist here, some different disciplines. We've been exploring some tactica. And now what we're going to do is inject a little bit of wargaming into it. This idea of controlling the random, understanding that disciplines, abilities, items, they're going to influence various scores. And naturally, we want to score high based on the perception or in combat. But I am at the mercy of the dice, the combat matrix, or the random number table. So we want to control that random as best we can. There's going to be some spoilers with this tactica right now. So if you're making your way through this series for the first time, you want to at least get through the first book, Flight from the Dark. We're going to push on from there. So the first thing that I'm looking at is what's your combat skill? And to a second, lesser extent, what is your endurance? And in theory, I do believe this is possible. You can have a very low combat skill and a very low endurance, meaning you have those base values you start with, but you roll a 1 or you pick a 1 on the random chart for combat skill. For endurance, you also pick a 1. It's possible without any spoilers across the first 5 books. There are, as it should be, some very, very difficult, some very, very challenging fights. But with some resource management and controlling the random, you could pull it off, although it would be very difficult. Naturally, if you're in that mid-band where I'm going to get 5 from a D10, or on the random number chart, 1 to 10, 5 is good. The higher numbers, 6, 7, 8, 10, much higher, makes things much easier. But even if I have a high combat skill and I have a high endurance, you can still, through some bad rolls or some various choices in the different books, the attrition of taking damage, even with healing and even using healing potions, it can wear you down to some of the mini boss or main boss fights will kill you. So we're looking to influence as much as we can. Now we need to just framework a little more tactica, and then we're going to talk about 2 special items that you acquire early on. And they both work a little bit differently, but I believe, in theory, one is more powerful than the other, although one is definitely much, much cooler and a lot more thematic, and that's where the spoiler is going to be. So with that, combat skill, in many ways, is more important than endurance. The ways that you take damage, hit points, endurance points, whatever we want to call it, first in combat, I'll take damage depending on the roll, the back and forth between me and the opponent. I can take and lose endurance if I don't eat a meal or if I'm unable to have a meal. And then there's also some special effects. You get hit by something, you're traveling and pushing on, certain elements within the story that say, -1 endurance. But combat is the main way that you lose it, and the main way that you lose it very, very quickly. And when you're in combat, you're locked in combat, you can't heal up. So anything that I can do to boost that combat skill is very, very important, vitally important, regardless of what my score is. Okay, we've got that framework out. Now come the spoilers. So the monastery is on fire. The Crystal Tower has crashed to the ground. The invasion has begun. Are you going to go left or are you going to go right? Making your way through that track of forest. One of the things that I like to do is I like to print out the map from the book and gradually mark my path where I'm going. I find it to be, as I go, Very, very thematic. One path will take you to the ruins where you can acquire a crystal star pendant. Now, right away, that sounds pretty cool. And this will give you, once per book, a reroll. A reroll. So right away, what we see is the way to control the random allows you a reroll. I roll a 1. I need something higher. I get a reroll. Now, I could roll a 1 again, but that is a way to control the random. And it can also be used for other aspects in the game. As an item, if you have it, it opens up some quest dialogues and some story stuff. But from the tactica of a wargaming perspective, it's going to grant you a reroll. Anytime, any game, I can get a reroll. That's good. The second path gives you a helmet. Over there in the field, a glint of metal, a helmet. This is going to give you +2 to your endurance. That's also very, very interesting. It is a permanent +2. That, if you have a lower endurance, that's going to give you a much needed boost. If you have an average endurance, right, 4, 5, or 6, when I rolled in character creation, that's a nice little boost also. And of course, if you rolled legendary, that's going to give you even that much more of a boost. The difference between the two, in my opinion, and as much as I love the Blue Crystal Star Pendant, and it's awesome and it opens up a lot, with that, if we're just looking at the tactica and the meta of it, the +2 endurance, I believe, is more powerful. Simply because and both of these are special items, it's always active. It's always on. I heal up, I heal up, I heal up. It's always active. It's not passive. It's always there. The pendant, you're kind of making that decision in the meta. Well, when do I use this reroll? How do I use this reroll? And one way or another, you're going to want to use that reroll. Hopefully, you don't use it or you're not forced to use it based on some random rerolls that didn't work out well. Hopefully, you want to save that for the end boss of the book or the series, the different books. And usually the narrative is very good, telling you when things are starting to lead up to that. The challenge here, though, one over the other. So just this idea of a power, generally speaking, a war game, a power or an ability or a modifier that is always on, always active, will be much more powerful than one that is a one-time use. So from that perspective, yes, absolutely, the helmet. However, the challenge here is, with that, is the fact that not having that reroll means you're stuck with the dice, unless you can find another way of dice manipulation. So, jumping that back out from the meta, not to take the narrative out of the book, but there are some very, very tough fights, and there are some places where there's a string of them, so you can make it through the first, and you're like, okay, I did it. You know, if I have healing, I'll heal up. If I don't have healing, I'll burn some healing potions. We'll get back in the game. But some of them that are back-to-back, having that initial boost of that +2, especially if you can find some other gear to boost that and combat skill along the way, that goes a long way. So as much as I love the pendant, and usually it's so thematic and it opens up a couple of other things, I will go for that pendant, even though I know where the helmet is. But every now and then, looking at a run, depending on my initial stats or some of the different paths that I'm taking, I feel better to control the random by giving me a higher starting stat than to rely on a once per book reroll.